and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live on CGTN. We begin in the DPRK capital, Pyongyang, where the Chinese president is paying a very important state visit. It's been 14 years since the Chinese president visited the country. Xi held talks with the nation's leader, Jong Un, earlier today. Their discussion centered on their country's friendship, as well as the state of the Korean Peninsula. Take a look.
A visit that comes 70 years after the countries established diplomatic ties. The Chinese president said he wanted to solidify their friendship and push for a political solution to the Korean Peninsula issue, a statement which would be well received in Pyongyang. President Xi proposed enhancing strategic communication on major issues. When it came to denuclearization, he said China recognized Pyongyang's concerns around security and development and was willing to help the government address them. He said China would like to work with all parties to find a political solution to the peninsula issue. The Chinese president, understanding the importance of cooperation in all areas, looked at the potential of education, health, and sports in particular. Meanwhile, Kim said President Xi's visit would help to direct their future relations and would showcase the unbreakable bond between the two countries. He added his country had made significant efforts to avoid escalating tension on the peninsula, but was disappointed by the response. However, he said Pyongyang would exercise patience and would continue to work with all parties to find a resolution.
And for more on the Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to Pyongyang, in Washington, D.C., we have Sue Kim, a former CIA North Korea analyst and currently a policy analyst at the RAND Corporation. In Chicago, U.S., Carl Friedhoff, a fellow in public opinion and Asia policy at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Last but not least, Zhao Tong with us in our Beijing studio, a fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Welcome to the three of you. Mr. Zhao first. This is quite a visit, the 70th anniversary of China's founding of the PRC. Meanwhile, 70th anniversary of this bilateral relations between DPRK and China. This time, quite new momentum, Mr. Zhao?
Yes, I think so. Since last year, after DPRK decided to shift towards focusing on domestic economic development and to reach out to the international community, the China-DPRK bilateral relationship has quickly improved, and President Chairman Jong Un has made 4 visits to China, and it's time, I think, for China to conduct a return visit, especially when this is the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the bilateral relationship. And also there are interesting developments over denuclearization as well. There are interesting signals from the United States recently and from South Korea as well. So hopefully this visit can also help promote progress on that issue.
Ms. Kim, there's always an issue, many debate as to what is driving the future of the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue, whether it's relationship between China and the DPRK, or the interaction between the U.S. and the DPRK, or the overall interactions among so many players in the region. What do you think, Ms. Kim, and how is this visit likely to have an impact on the next step?
Well, as you pointed out, the North Korean denuclearization issue is so complex. It's not just a bilateral issue between Washington and Pyongyang, but it involves all parties in the region. So President Xi Jinping's visit to North Korea, South Korean government has pitched it as such that it's going to accelerate progress toward dialogue again and perhaps get the denuclearization talks in progress. But we also have to look at not just the words, but the actions too. And we've seen that North Korea thus far hasn't really taken any steps to show that it's on that progressive path toward fully denuclearizing. So it remains to be seen what's actually going to be happening after the summit between President Xi Jinping and Kim Jong Un, and then President Trump and Xi Jinping will be meeting next week as well. So there's a lot of things that are at play right now, and we also have to think about where South Korea is kind of situating itself. Formerly known as the mediator between Washington and Pyongyang, and it appears as though that position has been supplanted by China.
there are a lot of things going on in the region. Of course, earlier there were interactions between Japan and the United States as well. I'm sure that also have an impact on where the DPRK issue is heading for when it comes to the policy considerations. Mr. Friedhoff, though, the Chinese president, during his interaction with the DPRK leader, they talk about the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue a lot. According to the press release we got recently in Chinese, so I try to translate into English while we speak to you. Mr. Kim, coming from the DPRK side, has been saying that the DPRK was disappointed somewhat about the not that proactive response coming from the other party. Obviously, we know that it's Washington he was referring to. However, he reiterated that DPRK will keep patience. What does that say to you?
So we know from previous statements by North Korea that they were going to wait until about the end of this year to try to arrange a third summit. We have seen in that time, since the last summit, we've seen a launch of a short-range missile that Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State in the United States, and Donald Trump have said that were not provocations and that they were going to say were okay. So I would expect that in the time that they wait, we may very well see a launch of something that is a little bit longer range. So of course they're going to try to pressure the United States back into a meeting. I actually think a meeting will take place near the end of this year, and quite frankly that's because Donald Trump wants this. This is one of the only issues when we look at this in public opinion polling that Donald Trump has majority approval. It's basically North Korea and the economy, and so I think the president sees this as a tool for him to get out of the country, to play the statesman that he thinks that he is, and who can then be seen on the world stage as trying to solve one of the most difficult problems in the world.
Mr. Zhao, of course, we do not want to forget the fact that it was the U.S. side, President Trump, who walked out from the earlier rounds of discussion with the DPRK leader. Of course, the world was surprised. I was in Vietnam, caught by surprise, so were many of the press corps members then. So, Mr. Zhao, help us to understand to what extent you think the overall interactions among all players is relevant or not. After all, it seems that Mr. Trump, what he's having in mind is only election and election alone, including his announcement about the meeting Chinese president. That was on the day in which he announced he's going to campaign for the re-election. And now we see maybe interactions in the future as a result of his seeking re-election, Mr. Zhao.
Yeah, I think recent events can help President Trump achieve progress on both of these important issues for him, North Korean denuclearization and gaining more popularity by stabilizing U.S.-China relationship. So on the nuclear front, we saw that the reason why U.S. and DPRK failed at Hanoi was because they didn't reach agreement on one core issue, which is how to design a roadmap for denuclearization. But on this issue, other regional players, including China, have been making efforts since then. Recently, Russia and China have been working together on a joint roadmap for the Korean Peninsula denuclearization. So maybe during this visit, President Xi would introduce this Russian-Chinese joint proposal to North Korea and use that as an opportunity to inject more momentum into the process, helping them resolve this core disagreement.
We do not want to forget the fact that this is a really very interesting timing. Ms. Kim, right before the G20 summit, only a week from then, of course, there are a lot of things that could be on the agenda when the two presidents from China and the U.S. meet. How important is this Korean Peninsula nuclear issue, do you think, in this bilateral discussion?
I think that the nuclear issue is going to play a peripheral role in that it's going to position President Xi Jinping in a better position to talk to President Trump and send him a gentle, subtle, but also resounding reminder that China continues to have an impact in regional dynamics. But as far as how the denuclearization issue is actually going to play into the bilateral talks, you have to also look at how well President Trump is positioned right now domestically. Right now, he's in campaign mode, and the North Korean threat, as far as we can tell by the Trump rhetoric reflected in his tweets, it doesn't seem like it's going to hold priority for now. But at the same time, let's say that his domestic approval ratings are going down and he needs additional, let's say, boost. He might look to the North Korea card to use that. So I think for President Xi Jinping, the fact that he met with with Kim Jong Un this week, as he prepares to and as he gears up to meet with President Trump next week, is going to put him in a better position. It's going to serve as a good reminder. But as far as how explicitly the denuclearization issue is going to come up, that's kind of yeah.
Yeah, it's another issue, of course, and it takes much longer than just a bilateral discussion. But there's one thing that we haven't talked about, which is extremely interesting and also extremely important as well. It's not just about the U.S., it's not just about the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue. It's really also about how China and the DPRK are likely to shape the nature of this relation at this critical juncture. With the U.S. issue, with the changes of the world, with the changes of the region. So, Mr. Friedhoff, I think I want to go to you about that too. We see the interactions among the two leaders, Chinese President Xi and Chairman Kim from the DPRK. They talk about the next step of cooperation. China particularly mentions several areas here: education, health, youth, and also cooperation in the future, nurturing of talents coming from the DPRK with the help of China for future development, issues related to the economic development, issues related to governance styles. All of this, what does it say to you as an American analyst when China and the DPRK are beginning to discuss all these issues?
Well, there was a time where I was meeting with American officials who had just returned from China, and this was from the period of, say, 2012 through 2015 and a little bit beyond that, where there was a real sense among the American officials that they all came to the same conclusion after these meetings, that China was really going through a significant rethink about its policy towards North Korea. They would say that North Korea is no longer seen as a strategic asset, it's a liability. They are now thinking very seriously, that is, the Chinese are thinking very seriously about Korean reunification. And I never quite bought into that because we never saw actions to back it up from the Chinese side. And I think that this now puts that argument very well to rest. If China is going there at such an important time, especially in consideration of where relations are with the United States, it seems that the determination is now that North Korea is very much going to be seen as a strategic asset, a country, China's only ally in the world that has nuclear weapons, and it would expect and hopefully that it would hope that North Korea is going to kind of continue to play this role of a problem for the United States.
Okay.
So it would not be a surprise to me in that consideration that China is going to try to interact with North Korea along all of the lines that are not proscribed by the United Nations Security Council resolutions, and whether that's tourism, which we've seen stories about a major uptick in Chinese tourism going into North Korea, education, health, all of those things, I think China is going to play a role in North Korea.
Mr. Zhao, of course, there are two different issues. One is the United Nations Security Council resolution. The other is some kinds of unilateral sanctions certain countries place on the DPRK. Those are two different issues. China would abide by, according to the Chinese spokespeople from the Foreign Ministry over the years, by the UN Security Council resolution. Well, the other unilateral sanctions against DPRK, of course, China will not abide by. By the way, having said that, though, I want you to pay attention to some of the phrases used in this bilateral talk between the DPRK and Chinese side. Once again, I'm trying to translate from Chinese into English if it's not 100% accurate. The Chinese side from President Xi is talking about jumpstart a new page of China-DPRK friendship. Well, from Chairman Kim, from the DPRK side, he's talking about it is going to showcase to the rest of the world of this traditional friendship between China and the DPRK that nobody could break. So we see some different terminologies being used. However, what exactly do you think are behind the way of describing this relationship? What does it say to you about how the two sides are looking into each other?
I think they do have a common vision for the future. We have to remember that Kim Jong Un made the important decision last year to shift towards economic development, to develop North Korea into a more modern and developed country. And in that regard, China has the best relationship with North Korea. North Korea trusts China more than any other country, and the two countries share some similar political systems and understanding about international relations, and therefore the Chinese experience of nation building and society development has the best lessons for North Korea, and is easiest for North Korea to learn. And North Korea has shown this interest in learning the Chinese experience. So in that sense, I think China feels we can work with DPRK to help DPRK transform into a modern country, and that's beneficial to everyone. And also in that process, we can effectively reduce North Korea's threat perception.
I see.
On the other hand, I think the two countries also share the vision that for regional security in the future, we also need to put pressure on the United States and its allies to address their military posture in this region. This is not only useful to reduce North Korea's threat perception and therefore to promote North Korea towards denuclearization, but also it's important for building a new peace regime in this region. That's also has broader implications for regional security going forward.
It seems that you're indicating that the DPRK and China are trying to work on their own tracks, at least, to push things a bit forward as far as they can, to establish some kinds of environment in which maybe the next step of progress can be done. Having said that, though, Ms. Kim, I also want to throw you some of the key words in this bilateral press release from the Chinese side. The Chinese side, the Chinese President Xi, talking about making sure the general direction of the development of this bilateral relations. He also emphasized about the importance to exchange opinions between the two sides on what he called significant issues, to deepen and exchange opinions, in his words, and also establish what he called a good environment and the deepening pragmatic cooperation. So all of these are the words, as we know. They could be political jargons, but in this case, they seem not to be jargons alone, but rather a general direction that China is seeking in having the new stage of relation with the DPRK. Your take?
So we have to look at the relationship between China and North Korea. I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and the summit that's taking place right now, it's basically like a renewal of this mutually beneficial contract. China perceives North Korea to be this, persistent, always there, sort of embarrassing relative that you just have to put up with. But in order to, instead of trying to put the relative actually back on track towards remediation and rehabilitation, China also sees North Korea as a valuable asset to China's strategic interests. So I think that the rhetoric so far has been, yes, it is going towards the general direction of enhancing China-North Korea ties on all aspects, but with the peace process in the peninsula in mind, and with also that in mind of the stalled Washington-Pyongyang denuclearization talks, this is an opportunity for both China and North Korea to combine forces and to reassert some of their strategic goals and interests in the face of, I guess, the logjam of negotiations.
Mr. Zhao, now, it's very difficult if we use all the traditional frameworks that have been talked about for decades, since the end of the Cold War, to look at the ever-changing, dramatic changes that we are seeing almost every day these days, including, this relationship between the DPRK and China. As the Chinese President Xi Jinping put it, it's really a new stage. So to you, what will bring these two countries closer together and what some see as dynamic change, even paradigm change time, these two countries can be seeking together, Mr. Zhao?
Well, I think what brings these two countries closer together is the reality that they are all, at least for now, nuclear-armed countries that can have important influence for regional security and stability. And they have growing interests in working together to build their nations, to fight for their right to develop in the way that they want, and also to push back against a pressure from other countries, including United States and its allies. So they feel they deserve the right to follow their own path of development. So I think that sense of shared thinking and understanding is really bring them closer together today.
I see. Before we go, we have only 1 minute to go. So very briefly from every one of you, 20 seconds if you can. What are you expecting to see, or what are you likely to watch very closely for the rest of the visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping to the DPRK? Ms. Kim, you go first.
So I'm actually interested in looking at the South Korean response. It's been kind of on the edge of its seats to see how things are going to be played out, where the ball is going to be tossed between Washington and Pyongyang, and now Beijing. So for President Moon, he's really bent on trying to make progress, trying to reassert himself. So, and with the summit coming up between him and President Trump, that's probably the next step for me.
I see. Mr. Friedhoff, please.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see how the U.S. is going to respond to this. Of course, right now it has its hands full with an attention on Iran, so North Korea has taken somewhat of a back seat. So it'll be interesting to see if this pushes North Korea back up the ladder and makes it one of the top priorities once again.
Interesting. Mr. Zhao, last but not least.
Well, I think one key issue is whether DPRK would use this opportunity to signal its willingness to offer more concessions or to soften its position on the denuclearization issue, and therefore injecting some new momentum into denuclearization.
Zhao Tong, Carl Friedhoff, last but not least, Sue Kim. Thank you so much, the three of you, for sharing your insights on World Insight with us. Thank you. Really appreciate it.